Homeless single mom carried a man with a twisted ankle, not realizing he was a billionaire CEO falling for her. "Put me down." I said, "Put me down." Jonathan Sterling shouted, his face flushing red as the homeless woman effortlessly hoisted his 180-pound frame onto her back like he weighed nothing. "Lady, you don't understand. I don't need help from someone like—" The words died in his throat as she turned her head, rain-soaked hair framing eyes that held more dignity than he'd seen in any boardroom. "Someone like what?" Maya Rodriguez asked quietly, adjusting her grip as she began carrying the injured billionaire through Seattle's storm, having no idea she was literally carrying $12 billion on her shoulders, or that this man who just insulted her would be begging for her love in 3 months. Before we get deep into today's story, I really want to know where you are watching from across the world. Please, drop in the comment section where you're watching. Hit the subscribe button if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have created something very special just for you, another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Once again, welcome to Mr. Paul's Stories, where we come together like old friends, wrapped in the warmth of stories that light up our souls. Now, before we start today's story, I want to ask you a thoughtful question, and I need your sincere answer. What would you do if you had to choose between feeding your child tonight or having a safe place to sleep? Let us know in the comments. Your answer might surprise you. Have you dropped your answer in the comments section below? Good. Now, with that honest answer of yours, let's begin today's story. The rain intensified, drumming against the market's tin roof like impatient fingers. Maya pulled her threadbare jacket tighter and hurried toward First Avenue, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the neon signs of tourist shops she could never afford to enter. 6 months ago, she'd been an assistant manager at a boutique hotel in Capitol Hill. 6 months ago, Sophia had her own bedroom decorated with butterflies, and Maya's biggest worry was whether to splurge on organic groceries. Now she knew every shelter's check-in time, every soup kitchen schedule, every corner where the rain wouldn't reach. "Mama." Sophia's voice was small from beneath the umbrella Maya held over both their heads. At 6 years old, her daughter had learned not to ask for things. Toys, treats, a real home, but her dark eyes still held questions Maya couldn't answer. "Mrs. Chun said the art teacher might let me keep the painting I made today." "That's wonderful, Mija." Maya's voice caught as she remembered Sophia's face lighting up over finger paints and construction paper, simple joys that felt monumental now. "Tell me about it." As they walked down the steep hill toward Pioneer Square, Sophia chattered about her painting, a house with 4 windows and a red door, smoke curling from the chimney, 2 stick figures holding hands in front. Maya's heart clenched. Even in her art, Sophia dreamed of stability Maya couldn't provide. The shelter would open its doors at 6 p.m. It was 5:30. And already a line was forming despite the rain. Maya recognized most of the faces, veterans like Tommy who talked to invisible enemies, elderly Mrs. Patterson who'd lost her apartment to medical bills, teenagers who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. They were all good people who'd had bad breaks. She told herself this every night to keep the shame from drowning her completely. "Look, Mama." Sophia pointed across the square toward the towering glass buildings of South Lake Union, where Amazon and other tech giants had transformed Seattle's skyline. Warm yellow light spilled from office windows 30 stories up. "Do you think people up there can see us?" Maya followed her daughter's gaze to those glittering towers where people worked late into the night, probably ordering dinner from restaurants that cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget. "I don't think they look down much, sweetheart." But tonight, one of them had. 37 floors above Pioneer Square, Jonathan Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, watching the ant-like figures below navigate the rain-slicked streets. At 34, he was the youngest CEO in Sterling Dynamics' 40-year history, having built the cybersecurity empire his father started into a $12 billion titan. The Seattle Times called him the Digital Fortress King. Forbes put him on their cover. None of it felt real anymore. His reflection stared back, sharp jawline, dark hair that cost more to cut than most people spent on rent, a $3,000 Italian suit that fit like armor. Behind him, the office buzzed with the controlled chaos of a company that never slept. Servers hummed, phones rang, keyboards clicked in a symphony of success that had become white noise years ago. "Mr. Sterling?" His assistant Miranda appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "The quarterly board meeting prep is ready, and your dinner with the Yamamoto delegation is confirmed for 8. Jonathan nodded without turning around. Another dinner where he'd smile and make small talk while negotiating deals worth millions. Another night in his Bellevue penthouse, eating takeout alone while reviewing profit projections. Another day in a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt hollow from within. Actually, cancel dinner. Tell them something came up. Miranda's eyebrows rose. In 5 years as his assistant, she'd never known him to cancel a deal meeting. "Sir, the Yamamoto contract is worth." "I know what it's worth." Jonathan grabbed his jacket, not the wool overcoat that screamed wealth, but a simple black jacket he kept in his closet for the rare times he wanted to blend in. "I'm going for a walk." "A walk?" "Mr. Sterling, it's pouring outside and you have." But he was already heading for the elevator. As the doors closed, Jonathan caught his reflection one more time. When was the last time he'd walked somewhere just to walk? When had he last spoken to another human being about something that wasn't stocks, strategies, or stakeholder meetings? The elevator descended past the 20th floor, where his marketing team worked. Past the 15th, where his developers coded the firewalls that protected half of corporate America. Past the 10th, where his lawyers negotiated contracts that would never satisfy the ache in his chest. When the doors opened onto the parking garage, Jonathan kept his finger on the button for the lobby. He wanted to walk among real people tonight. He wanted to remember what that felt like. The rain hit him the moment he stepped onto First Avenue, soaking through his jacket within seconds. He'd forgotten how cold Seattle rain could be, how it seemed to find every gap in your defenses. Around him, people hurried past with umbrellas and purpose, workers heading home to families, couples sharing cabs, friends laughing as they ducked into bars and restaurants. Jonathan had no destination. He wandered down toward Pioneer Square, drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. The historic district felt different at street level, older, grittier, more real than the sanitized world of corporate towers. Street musicians played under covered walkways, their guitar cases open for donations. Food trucks served steaming coffee to anyone with a few dollars. The smell of rain mixed with grilled onions and car exhaust created an oddly comforting urban perfume. As he turned onto Occidental Park, Jonathan noticed the line forming outside a building with a simple sign, Union Gospel Mission. Men and women of all ages stood quietly in the rain, some alone, some with children. They weren't the faceless statistics from his company's charitable donation reports. They were individuals, a woman clutching a little girl's hand, an old man with kind eyes, a teenager who couldn't be more than 18. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt something real stir in his chest. Not the satisfaction of closing a deal or the adrenaline of launching a new product, but something deeper. Empathy. connection. The recognition that these people's struggles were as real and important as any boardroom crisis he'd ever faced. He was so lost in thought that he didn't see the uneven sidewalk ahead. His foot caught the edge of a broken concrete slab, and pain shot through his ankle like lightning. Jonathan stumbled, crying out as he hit the wet pavement hard. The rain kept falling, washing over him as he lay there, and for a moment, the billionaire CEO felt as helpless and vulnerable as anyone else caught in life's storms. That's when he heard footsteps running toward him, and a voice that would change everything. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Maya didn't hesitate. The moment she saw the man fall, her maternal instincts overrode everything else. The shelter line, the rain, even Sophia's small hand in hers. She pressed her umbrella into her daughter's grip and ran toward the stranger sprawled on the sidewalk. "Don't move," she said, kneeling beside him in the growing puddle. "You might have hurt something else." Jonathan looked up through the rain streaming down his face and saw the most beautiful woman he'd ever encountered. Not magazine beautiful, but real beautiful. Her dark hair was plastered to her head, her jacket soaked through, but her brown eyes held a warmth that seemed to cut straight through Seattle's November chill. She couldn't have been more than 30, with laugh lines around her eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "I think I twisted my ankle," he managed, struck by how her first instinct had been to help a complete stranger. When was the last time someone had looked at him with pure concern, not calculating what they could gain? Maya assessed the situation quickly. His right ankle was already swelling, and he winced when he tried to move it. Behind her, Sophia stood dutifully holding the umbrella, water dripping from its edges. The shelter line was getting longer, and Maya knew that arriving late could mean spending the night in the rain. None of that mattered. "Sophia, bring the umbrella here, sweetheart." Maya positioned herself at the man's side. "What's your name?" "John," he said without thinking. It had been years since he'd used the shortened version his college friends once called him. "Jonathan." "I'm Maya, and this is Sophia. Can you put weight on it at all?" Jonathan tried to stand and immediately collapsed back down, his face pale with pain. "I don't think so." Maya looked around. The nearest hospital was Swedish Medical Center, at least 8 blocks uphill. The rain was coming down harder, and this man needed help now. She made a decision that went against every practical instinct she developed since becoming homeless. "I'm going to help you get somewhere dry, okay? There's a covered area by the ferry terminal, and we can call 911 from there." "No," Jonathan said quickly. The last thing he wanted was paramedics, reporters, his security team descending on Pioneer Square. No ambulance. Just somewhere dry would be good. Maya studied his face. There was something in his voice, not just pain, but a kind of desperation that reminded her of her own need to stay invisible sometimes. She nodded. "This is going to hurt," she warned him, then positioned herself so he could lean his full weight against her. "On 3. 1, 2. She didn't wait for 3. In one fluid motion, Maya wrapped Jonathan's arm around her shoulders and hauled him to his feet. He was taller than her by at least 6 inches and probably outweighed her by 60 pounds, but she'd carried Sophia through fever-racked nights, had moved furniture by herself when they'd lost their apartment, had found reserves of strength she never knew she possessed. Jonathan was stunned. This woman, this stranger who barely knew him, was literally carrying him through the rain. Her body was small but surprisingly strong, and she moved with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned to handle crises alone. Most people would have called for help and waited. Maya had simply acted. "You don't have to do this," he said as they moved slowly toward the covered walkway near the ferry dock. Each step sent lightning through his ankle, but he was more aware of her warmth against his side, the way she shortened her stride to match his limping pace, how she angled her body to take most of the rain. "Yes, I do," Maya replied simply. Sophia walked ahead of them, holding the umbrella over her mother and the stranger, her small legs working hard to keep up. Jonathan watched the little girl. She couldn't be more than 6, and felt something crack open in his chest. When had anyone ever put his welfare above their own without expecting something in return? They reached the covered area, and Maya helped him sit on a concrete ledge. The ferry terminal's overhang provided blessed relief from the rain, and Maya immediately knelt to examine his ankle. Her touch was gentle but confident. "It's definitely sprained, maybe worse. You really should see a doctor." "I'll be fine," Jonathan said, though his ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. "Thank you. This was incredibly kind of you." Maya sat back on her heels, studying his face. "You say that like kindness is rare. Isn't it?" The words slipped out before he could stop them, carrying more truth than he'd intended. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, maybe, or a question neither was ready to ask. Maya saw loneliness in this stranger's face that matched her own. Jonathan saw strength and grace that had nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with character. Sophia tugged on Maya's wet jacket. "Mama," the line at the shelter. Reality crashed back. Maya looked across the square to see the line had nearly doubled. By the time they walked back, there might not be space. But this man was hurt, and she couldn't just leave him. "Go," Jonathan said, reading her conflict. "I'll manage." Maya looked at him, really looked. His clothes were expensive, but understated. His watch, what she could see of it, looked like it cost more than she'd made in a month at the hotel. But his eyes held the same vulnerability she saw in the shelter line every night. "No," she said firmly. "You won't." And in that moment, as rain drummed against the terminal roof and Seattle's lights blurred through the darkness, both their lives shifted toward something neither had expected to find: hope. Maya's hands trembled as she unlocked the door to the tiny studio apartment, her mind still reeling from the events at the hospital. The social worker had called it a temporary housing placement, 6 months maximum, while Maya got back on her feet. It wasn't much, 400 square feet above a Korean restaurant, a Murphy bed, a kitchenette smaller than most people's closets. But it had a lock on the door and heat that worked, and right now, that felt like a palace. "Mama, is this really ours?" Sophia whispered, her small hand clutching the new stuffed elephant the mysterious man from the street had somehow arranged to be waiting for them. "For now, Mija. Just for now." Maya couldn't bring herself to say more. 6 hours ago, she'd been counting quarters for dinner. Now she had an apartment key, a job interview scheduled for Monday at a downtown hotel, and a head full of questions about a stranger who'd changed her life with a single phone call. She pulled out the business card he'd pressed into her palm before the paramedics took him away. Jonathan S. was all it said, with a phone number written in careful script below. No company name, no title, just 2 words that somehow carried the weight of everything that had happened. Maya sank onto the second-hand couch that had come furnished with the apartment and stared at the card. She tried calling twice from a hospital payphone, but it went straight to voicemail, a simple recording that said, "Leave a message," in that same warm voice that had told her she deserved better than sleeping on the streets. "Who are you really?" she whispered to the empty room. 3 miles away, in the marble-floored foyer of his Bellevue penthouse, Jonathan stood dripping wet in his ruined clothes, his twisted ankle throbbing despite the prescription painkillers. The doctor had wanted to keep him overnight for observation, but he discharged himself the moment Maya and Sophia had left with the social worker. Now he felt hollow, disconnected from his own life in a way that made no sense. He'd spent 3 hours with a homeless woman and her daughter, and somehow those 3 hours felt more real than the last 3 years of his carefully orchestrated existence. His phone buzzed with 17 missed calls from Miranda, 43 unread emails marked urgent, and a string of increasingly frantic text messages from his board members about tomorrow's quarterly presentation. The Yamamoto deal he'd abandoned was worth $40 million. His absence from the dinner meeting would require explanations he wasn't prepared to give. But all he could think about was the way Maya had insisted on carrying him 6 blocks, her thin frame supporting his weight while she whispered encouragements in both English and Spanish. The fierce protectiveness in her voice when she told the paramedics her daughter wasn't leaving her side. The way she'd looked at him in the hospital corridor, not with the calculating interest he was used to from women, but with genuine concern for a stranger who'd stumbled into her world. Jonathan limped to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Lake Washington's dark waters. His reflection stared back, still the same face that had graced magazine covers, still the same man who could buy and sell companies with a phone call. But something fundamental had shifted, and he wasn't sure he could shift it back. His secure line rang, the one only his most trusted associates knew about. Miranda's name appeared on the display. "Where the hell are you?" Her voice was sharp with worry and frustration. "The board is in full panic mode. Richard Yamamoto is threatening to pull the deal. The Journal is asking questions about your sudden disappearance from—" "I'm fine." Jonathan's voice sounded strange even to himself. "Tell the board I'll be in Monday morning for the presentation as scheduled." "Jonathan, what happened tonight? This isn't like you. You don't just vanish during crucial negotiations. You don't." "I helped someone." The words came out before he could stop them. "I met someone who reminded me that there's a world outside these deals and mergers." Silence stretched across the line. When Miranda spoke again, her voice was gentler. "Okay. That's actually kind of wonderful. But you can help people and still be a CEO. You can care about the world and still show up for $40 million deals." Could he? Jonathan wasn't sure anymore. Standing in his climate-controlled penthouse with its imported marble and custom furniture, he felt like a fraud. Maya had given him everything she had, her strength, her compassion, her trust, while he'd given her nothing but lies by omission. She thought he was just another struggling person who'd caught a lucky break. The truth would destroy whatever fragile connection they'd built. "Cancel my morning meetings," he said finally. "I need to think." "Jonathan." He hung up and turned off the phone. In the silence that followed, his penthouse felt more like a prison than a home. Beautiful, comfortable, completely isolated from the real world where people like Maya fought daily battles just to survive. The business card she'd left on his nightstand at the hospital lay on his granite kitchen counter, her name written in careful block letters, along with the address of Sophia's school and a note. "Thank you for reminding me that angels come in unexpected forms. I'll pay it forward someday. Maya and Sophia." Angels. If only she knew the truth, that he was just a man who'd built walls so high around his heart that it had taken a stranger's kindness to remember what it felt like to be human. A man whose wealth could solve her problems with pocket change, but whose honesty might cost him the first real connection he'd felt in years. Jonathan stared at her note until the words blurred, wrestling with a choice that shouldn't have been a choice at all. Tell Maya the truth and risk losing her, or continue the lie and lose himself. Outside, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars he'd forgotten how to reach for, while somewhere across the city, a woman who'd carried him to safety was probably wondering if she'd ever see him again. The Union Gospel Mission's emergency room was nothing like the sterile medical facilities Jonathan was accustomed to. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on cracked linoleum floors. The air smelled of antiseptic mixed with coffee and something he couldn't identify, hope, maybe, or desperation. Maya sat beside him on a plastic chair that had seen better decades, Sophia curled up asleep in her lap despite the chaos around them. "You really don't have to stay," Jonathan said for the third time, adjusting the ice pack on his swollen ankle. The volunteer nurse had confirmed it was badly sprained, not broken, but he needed to keep it elevated and iced for the next few hours before attempting to walk on it. Maya looked up from stroking Sophia's hair. "Where exactly are you planning to go at midnight with a twisted ankle and no phone?" She'd been quiet since they'd arrived, watching him with those perceptive dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "Besides, they're not letting anyone leave until the storm passes. Emergency protocol." Through the small windows, lightning illuminated the worst storm Seattle had seen all year. Rain hammered against the glass like angry fists, and the wind howled between buildings with a fury that made even the mission's sturdy walls shudder. The volunteer coordinator had announced an hour ago that the building was on lockdown, no one in or out until the weather cleared, which the radio predicted wouldn't happen until dawn. Jonathan had never felt more trapped or more oddly at peace. In his world, being stuck anywhere was a crisis to be solved with phone calls and money. Here, surrounded by people who dealt with uncertainty daily, waiting felt almost normal. "Mama." Sophia stirred in Maya's arms, blinking up at the harsh lights. "Is the hurt man going to be okay?" "The hurt man is going to be fine," Jonathan answered before Maya could respond. "Thanks to your mama. She's a hero, you know." Sophia studied him seriously. "She carries me when I'm tired too. Mama's really strong." "I can see that." Jonathan caught Maya's eye over Sophia's head. Something passed between them, recognition, understanding, something deeper than gratitude. "What grade are you in, Sophia?" "First grade. Mrs. Chun says I'm good at reading." Sophia's shyness melted away as she talked. "I can read chapter books. Mama reads to me every night, even when we don't have a house." Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. This child spoke about homelessness with a matter-of-fact acceptance that broke his heart. "What's your favorite book?" "Charlotte's Web. Charlotte saves Wilbur even though she's just a spider and he's bigger. Mama says sometimes the smallest people can do the biggest things." Maya's cheeks flushed. "Sophia, honey, maybe Mr." She paused, realizing she still didn't know his name. "Jonathan. Just Jonathan." He extended his hand to Sophia first, then to Maya. When their fingers touched, he felt that same electric current from earlier, stronger now in the fluorescent-lit intimacy of their forced proximity. "I'm Maya. And my philosopher daughter is Sofia Elena Rodriguez. It's nice to officially meet you both." Jonathan found himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. "I have to ask, Maya. When Sophia gets tired, do you really carry her?" "Everywhere we need to go." Maya's voice held quiet pride. "She's gotten heavier, but she's still my baby. I'll carry her as long as I can." Around them, the emergency shelter had settled into the rhythm of people making the best of an unexpected night together. Families shared snacks. Elderly residents told stories to wide-eyed children. Someone had found a deck of cards, and a group was playing poker using coffee stirrers as chips. The forced intimacy of the storm had created something Jonathan rarely experienced in his corporate world: genuine human community. "You must think this is all pretty overwhelming," Maya said, watching him observe the scene around them. "Not exactly what you're used to, I'm guessing." Jonathan considered lying, defaulting to the vague responses he'd perfected for avoiding personal questions. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "Honestly, it's the most real thing I've experienced in years. Everyone here is just present. No one's checking phones or talking about deals or pretending to be someone they're not. That's because when you don't have much, you can't afford to pretend." Maya's voice held no bitterness, just observation. Survival strips away a lot of the masks people wear. "Is that what this is? Survival?" Maya looked down at Sophia, who had fallen back asleep against her shoulder. "It's what it was. Tonight feels different somehow." She met his eyes. "Maybe because someone reminded me that kindness still exists. That not everyone looks through you like you're invisible." The lights flickered as thunder crashed overhead, and several children whimpered. Without thinking, Jonathan began talking in a calm, steady voice about the science of thunderstorms, how lightning was just electricity seeking the path of least resistance, how thunder was the sound of air expanding faster than sound could travel. His voice carried across the room, and gradually, the frightened whispers quieted. "You're good with kids," Maya observed softly. "I used to be. A long time ago." Jonathan's voice grew distant. "I had a little brother. He was afraid of storms too." Had. Jonathan was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words were barely audible above the rain. "Car accident. He was 8. I was supposed to pick him up from soccer practice, but I had a meeting that ran late." Maya's free hand found his before she could think better of it. "Jonathan, I'm so sorry." Her touch grounded him, pulled him back from the familiar spiral of guilt and regret. "It was 15 years ago. You'd think it would get easier." "Some kinds of carrying never get lighter," Maya said quietly. "We just get stronger at bearing the weight." As the storm raged outside, trapping them together in this pocket of unexpected intimacy, Jonathan realized that for the first time in 15 years, the weight felt shared. The emergency room had finally quieted after the evening rush, leaving Maya and Jonathan in a pocket of unexpected intimacy among the sterile chairs and flickering fluorescent lights. Sophia slept curled against Maya's side, her small fingers still clutching the hospital's coloring book. 3 hours had passed since they'd arrived, 3 hours of waiting that had somehow become the most honest conversation Jonathan had experienced in years. "Tell me about her father," he said quietly, nodding toward Sophia. The question had been building in him since they'd sat down, not from judgment but from genuine curiosity about the woman who'd shown him more kindness than he'd received from people who'd known him for decades. Maya's hand stilled where it had been stroking Sophia's hair. For a moment, Jonathan thought she wouldn't answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Diego was everything I thought I wanted when I was 22. Charming, ambitious, full of big dreams about the restaurant he'd open someday." She smiled, but it held more pain than joy. "He could make me laugh until my sides hurt, could paint pictures of our future that seemed so real I could almost taste them." Jonathan waited, sensing there was more beneath the surface of those memories. "When I got pregnant, he was excited at first. Said we'd be this perfect family, that the baby would motivate him to finally get serious about his goals. Maya's laugh was bitter now. But Sophia was colicky. She cried constantly those first few months. I was working double shifts at the hotel, coming home exhausted, and Diego, he started staying out later. Said he needed space to think. Sophia stirred in her sleep, and Maya automatically adjusted the hospital blanket around her daughter's shoulders. The gesture was so instinctive, so protective, that Jonathan felt something twist in his chest. One morning when Sophia was 8 months old, I woke up and he was gone. Just gone. His clothes, his guitar, even the coffee maker his mother gave us for Christmas. He left a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father, that he needed to find himself. Maya's voice cracked slightly. He found himself, all right. I saw him on Facebook 6 months later, posting pictures from Portland with his new girlfriend. No mention of the daughter he left behind. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. He'd faced corporate raiders, hostile takeovers, board members who tried to destroy his company, but none of that had triggered the protective anger now burning in his chest. Maya, I'm so sorry. The worst part wasn't him leaving, she continued, her eyes fixed on Sophia's peaceful face. It was realizing that I'd been so blinded by what I wanted to see that I'd missed who he really was. All those big dreams, all those promises, they were just words to him. Pretty stories that sounded good in the moment. She looked up at Jonathan then, and he saw a wariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. That's why I don't trust easily anymore. When someone tells me who they are through their actions, I believe them. When they tell me through their words. She shrugged. Words are cheap. The weight of her statement settled between them like a physical presence. Jonathan thought about all the careful truths he'd been telling her, his name, his interest in her life, his growing feelings. All technically honest, but built on a foundation of massive omission. What about you? Maya asked, shifting slightly so she could face him better. You've heard my sob story. What's yours? Jonathan's throat went dry. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading and craving in equal measure. The chance to tell her everything, to lay his cards on the table and see if what they'd built could survive the truth. But as he opened his mouth to speak, his phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. Sorry, he muttered, glancing at the screen. 17 missed calls from Miranda. 12 from his head of security. 8 from his brother Marcus, who only called during genuine emergencies. The most recent text from Miranda made his blood run cold. Car accident outside your building. Media thinks you were involved. Stock dropping. Need statement now. Everything okay? Maya asked, noticing his expression. Jonathan stared at the phone, then at Maya's concerned face, then at Sophia sleeping so trustfully against her mother's side. In a few hours, his disappearance would be front-page news. The speculation, the photos, the inevitable investigation into everywhere he'd been and everyone he'd spoken to. Maya and Sophia would be dragged into a media circus that would destroy the quiet dignity Maya worked so hard to maintain. Jonathan. Maya's voice held a note of worry now. You look like you've seen a ghost. He could tell her. Right here, right now. Explain about the company, the accident, the media storm brewing. Hope that she'd understand why he'd hidden his identity, why he'd let her believe he was just another struggling guy who understood her world. But as he looked at Sophia's peaceful face, at Maya's tired eyes that had finally started to soften with trust, Jonathan made a choice that would haunt him for days to come. Just work stuff, he said, shoving the phone back into his pocket. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. Maya studied his face for a long moment. You sure? Because you look. I'm sure. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth, but he told himself it was temporary. Just until Sophia's ankle was better. Just until he could find the right way to explain. Just until he could figure out how to protect them from the storm that was coming. But even as he made that promise to himself, Jonathan knew he was walking the same path Diego had walked, choosing the easy lie over the difficult truth, prioritizing his own comfort over Maya's right to know who she was really talking to. The difference was, he told himself, he planned to come clean eventually. The difference was, he was falling in love with her. The difference was, he thought his reasons were noble. But as Maya settled back against her chair, her walls sliding back into place just slightly, Jonathan realized that good intentions might not be enough to bridge the chasm between his world and hers. Outside, the Seattle rain kept falling, washing the city clean while secrets festered in the spaces between words unsaid. The morning sun filtered through the community center's tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn linoleum floor where Sophia sat cross-legged, carefully arranging her art supplies. Maya watched from the doorway as her daughter explained her painting to Jonathan, who sat beside her on a tiny plastic chair that looked comically small beneath his frame. "This is our house," Sophia said, pointing to the red door she'd painted with meticulous 6-year-old precision. "And this is Mama, and this is me, and—" She hesitated, glancing up at Jonathan with shy hope. "This could be you, if you want to live with us." Maya's breath caught. Jonathan's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before, vulnerable, almost broken. He reached out to gently touch the painted figure Sophia had added beside theirs. "That's the nicest invitation I've ever received," he said quietly. "What would I do in this house?" "Help Mama not be sad anymore," Sophia replied with the devastating honesty of children. "And maybe teach me about computers, because you're really smart." Jonathan looked up at Maya, and she saw her own raw emotion reflected in his eyes. 3 days had passed since he'd insisted on helping them find temporary housing in a transitional family shelter in Ballard. 3 days of morning coffee while Sophia played, of Jonathan showing up with groceries he claimed were extras from his own shopping, of conversations that stretched long into the evening after Sophia fell asleep. Maya had stopped questioning why this stranger cared. She'd stopped analyzing the expensive watch he wore or the way he seemed to have unlimited flexibility in his work schedule. All that mattered was the gentle way he listened to Sophia's chatter, the respect in his voice when he spoke to Maya, the growing warmth in her chest every time he smiled. "Your mama isn't sad," Jonathan told Sophia, though his eyes never left Maya's face. "She's the strongest person I've ever met. But everyone needs help sometimes, even the strongest people. Like when you hurt your ankle and Mama carried you." Exactly like that. Jonathan stood carefully. His ankle was healing well, though he still favored it slightly. "Speaking of which, I brought something for both of you." From a canvas bag beside his chair, he pulled out a small laptop, gently used but perfectly functional. "I thought you might like to learn together. Sophia can practice her letters, and Maya." He turned to her with an expression that made her heart skip. "I remember you mentioned wanting to take online courses someday." Maya stared at the laptop, then at him. "Jonathan, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's nothing." "I mean," he caught himself, and she saw something flicker across his face, a momentary guardedness that disappeared as quickly as it came. "It's not nothing to you, I know that. But please, let me do this." You've given me more in 3 days than I've received in years. What have I given you? Maya asked softly. I don't have anything to give. Jonathan moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the coffee they'd shared. You've given me purpose. You've made me remember what it feels like to matter to someone, to be needed for who I am rather than. He trailed off, then started again. You've made me remember how to be human, Maya. How to connect. I'd forgotten that was possible. The air between them hummed with unspoken feelings. Maya felt pulled toward him like a tide, drawn by the sincerity in his voice and the way he looked at her, not with pity or charity, but with genuine care and something deeper she was afraid to name. Mama, look. Sophia had opened the laptop and was pressing keys, delighted when letters appeared on the screen. It's like magic. They spent the next hour teaching Sophia to type her name, Jonathan's patience endless as he guided her small fingers across the keyboard. Maya watched them together, this man who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers she'd been afraid to voice, and her daughter who was blooming under his attention. I used to think, Maya said during a quiet moment while Sophia was absorbed in a typing game, that accepting help meant I was failing Sophia, that I should be able to provide everything she needs on my own. And now? Jonathan asked. Now I think maybe the bravest thing is letting someone care about us. She met his eyes, saw her own vulnerability reflected there. I think maybe Sophia needs to see that it's okay to trust people, to let them into our lives. What about what Maya needs? His voice was soft, careful. Maya needs. She paused, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was about to admit. Maya needs to stop being afraid of feeling happy, of believing that good things can happen to people like us. People like us? People who've made mistakes. People who've lost everything. People who are just trying to rebuild. She gestured around the community center, where other families in transition moved through their daily routines. You don't belong in this world, Jonathan. You're educated, successful, stable. You could have anyone, be anywhere. Why are you here with us? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, watching Sophia's face glow with concentration. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me when I was broken and didn't see what I could do for them or what they could get from me. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. No agenda, no calculation. Just kindness. He turned to face her fully. I've spent years being the person everyone wants something from. With you, I get to be the person who gives. With Sophia, I get to be the person who shows up. That's not charity, Maya. That's a gift. Maya felt tears threatening. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of this being too good to be true. Of you disappearing when you realize how complicated our lives are. Of Sophia getting attached and then losing another person who matters to her. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Of letting myself believe that maybe we deserve this happiness. Jonathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face gently. You deserve everything good the world has to offer, Maya Rodriguez. You and Sophia both. And I'm not going anywhere. The promise hung in the air between them, fragile and precious as the first flowers of spring. The morning after their kiss, Maya woke in Jonathan's guest room to the sound of urgent voices in the hallway. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of the evening, his gentle touch, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious, the taste of hope on his lips. For the first time in months, she'd allowed herself to dream of a future that didn't involve counting coins or choosing between rent and food. Sophia was still sleeping peacefully beside her, clutching the stuffed elephant Jonathan had bought her at the Space Needle gift shop. Maya smiled, remembering how her daughter's eyes had lit up when he'd insisted she pick out anything she wanted. "Every princess needs a royal companion," he'd said, kneeling to Sophia's level with such genuine warmth that Maya's heart had nearly burst. The voices in the hall grew louder, more urgent. Maya slipped on her borrowed robe, silk, probably worth more than her old car, and crept toward the door. She could hear Jonathan's voice, tight with frustration, and another man speaking in rapid professional tones. "Damage control needs to happen now. The photos are already circulating on social media. Billionaire CEO's mystery woman," that's the headline on 3 gossip sites. Maya's blood turned to ice. "Photos? What photos?" "I don't care about the headlines," Jonathan said, but his voice carried a strain she'd never heard before. "This is my private life." "Nothing is private when you're worth $12 billion, John. The board is asking questions. Your shareholders are nervous. And this woman," the stranger's voice dropped, but Maya caught the words anyway. Her background check came back. "Homeless, unemployed, evicted twice in the past year. The optics are terrible." Background check. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. While she'd been falling in love, he'd been investigating her like a potential threat. Her hands shook as she gripped the doorframe. "I didn't ask for a background check," Jonathan snapped. "Your security team runs them automatically on anyone who spends time in your personal spaces. Look, I get it. She's beautiful. She seems nice. Great story about helping you when you were hurt. But think about what you're risking here. A homeless woman with a child? The media will have a field day. They'll paint you as either a fool being manipulated or a predator taking advantage of a vulnerable woman." Maya pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to be sick. Every kind word, every gentle touch, had it all been pity? Had he seen her as some charity case to fix? She's not like that. But Jonathan's protest sounded weaker now, uncertain. "Maybe not. But perception is reality in our world. The Yamamoto deal alone is worth $300 million. They're traditional, conservative. They won't do business with someone they see as reckless or scandalous. And if the board loses confidence..." Maya heard footsteps approaching the door. Panicked, she backed away, but it was too late. Jonathan appeared in the doorway, his face pale with exhaustion. Behind him stood a man in an expensive suit, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, everything Maya had expected from Jonathan's world but had hoped to never encounter. "Maya." Jonathan's voice was strained. "I was just coming to check on you." The man behind him, his lawyer? His advisor, studied Maya with the cold assessment of someone calculating worth. His gaze took in her borrowed robe, her tangled hair, the way she unconsciously stepped back under his scrutiny. She could practically see his mental notes: threat level, damage potential, liability assessment. "This is Richard Blackwood, my..." "I know what I am," Richard interrupted, extending a hand Maya didn't take. "Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it? I apologize for the early hour, but we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "What kind of situation?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Richard glanced at Jonathan, who looked away. "Photos of you and Jonathan at various locations around the city have appeared online. The speculation about your relationship is creating complications for sterling dynamics. Maya felt the walls closing in. She was the complication. She was the damage that needed control. I should go. Maya, wait. Jonathan stepped forward, but Richard's hand on his arm stopped him. Actually, that might be best for everyone, Richard said smoothly. We've taken the liberty of preparing a standard non-disclosure agreement. Nothing personal, you understand, just to protect everyone's privacy. There's also a relocation fund available to help you get back on your feet. Somewhere outside Seattle, perhaps. A fresh start. The words hit Maya like slaps. They wanted to pay her to disappear. To vanish from Jonathan's life like she'd never existed. Behind her, she heard Sophia stirring, calling for her mama in the sleepy voice that had been her anchor through every crisis. How much? The question left her lips before she could stop it, and she hated herself for asking. Richard's smile was all teeth. Enough to ensure you and your daughter have stable housing for several years. Good schools, medical care, whatever you need. All we ask is discretion. Maya looked at Jonathan, searching his face for any sign that he would fight this, that he would tell his advisor to go to hell and choose her instead. But he stood frozen, torn between two worlds, hers and his, and she could see the moment he made his choice in the slight slump of his shoulders. The paperwork is straightforward, Richard continued, producing a folder from his briefcase. Temporary support while you transition to a new city, and a lump sum payment in exchange for your agreement not to discuss your relationship with Jonathan publicly. You want to buy my silence. Maya's voice was steady now, the numbness of betrayal replacing the sharp pain. We want to protect everyone involved, Richard corrected. Including you. The media attention would be intrusive, potentially harmful to your daughter. This way, you can start over without the complications of public scrutiny. Sophia's voice drifted from the bedroom again, calling for breakfast, asking if they were going to see the ducks at the park like Jonathan had promised. Each innocent word was another twist of the knife. Maya turned to Jonathan, giving him one last chance. Is this what you want? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. In his eyes, she saw genuine pain, maybe even love, but also resignation. He was a businessman first, and she was a liability to be managed. I think, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, it might be best for everyone. The last piece of her heart that had dared to hope crumbled to dust. Maya nodded once, sharply, and took the folder from Richard's hands. I need an hour to pack and explain to my daughter why we're leaving the first place she's felt safe in months. Of course. The car will wait. Maya walked back into the bedroom, closing the door behind her with careful precision. Sophia was awake now, sitting up in the massive bed with her hair sticking up in all directions. Mama, where's Jonathan? He said we could make pancakes this morning. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her daughter into her arms. We have to go, Mija. Something came up. But what about the ducks? And the pancakes? And Jonathan said he wanted to show me his office with all the computers. Each innocent question was a fresh wound. Maya held Sophia tighter, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, reminding herself why she had to be strong. Sometimes grown-ups make promises they can't keep, Maya whispered. But we're going to be okay. We always are, right? Sophia pulled back to look at her mother's face, her 6-year-old instincts picking up on the pain Maya was trying to hide. Are you sad, Mama? Maya forced a smile, The same brave face she'd worn through evictions and empty cupboards and nights when she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if she was failing as a mother. "Just tired, baby. Let's get dressed. We have a big adventure ahead of us." As Sophia went to gather her few possessions, Maya looked around the guest room that had briefly felt like sanctuary. The silk sheets, the view of Elliott Bay, the safety she'd allowed herself to believe might last, all of it was slipping away like water through her fingers. She'd been a fool to think she could belong in Jonathan's world. But the cruelest part wasn't the money they were offering or the NDA they wanted her to sign. It was the look in Jonathan's eyes, the genuine regret mixed with relief. He cared about her, maybe even loved her, but not enough to fight for her when it mattered. Maya signed the papers with a hand that didn't shake. She took their money because Sophia needed stability more than Maya needed her pride. And when the black car pulled up to take them to their new life in Portland, she didn't look back at the penthouse windows. But Jonathan was watching from 37 floors up as the car disappeared into Seattle traffic, taking with it the first real happiness he'd felt in years. And for the first time since his father's death, the digital fortress king allowed himself to cry. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Jonathan had been pacing the marble floors for 3 days, his twisted ankle, now properly treated by his private physician, barely registering against the deeper pain in his chest. 47 floors above Seattle, surrounded by every luxury money could buy, he had never felt more alone. His phone buzzed constantly. Board meetings. Investment calls. The Yamamoto deal that Miranda kept rescheduling. The world of Sterling Dynamics continued spinning, but Jonathan felt detached from it all, as if he were watching someone else's life through thick glass. On his kitchen island sat a manila folder, Maya's background check, delivered by his private investigator within hours of their confrontation at the hotel. Inside were the facts of her life laid bare. Maria Elena Rodriguez, 28. Former hotel management student at University of Washington. Laid off from the Fairmont Olympics 6 months ago during budget cuts. No criminal record. No debts beyond medical bills from Sophia's pneumonia last winter. A good mother who read to her daughter every night in whatever shelter would take them. The investigator had been thorough, too thorough. There were photos of Maya walking Sophia to the community center for her free art classes, of her volunteering at a food bank despite having nothing herself, of her sitting on a park bench teaching Sophia basic math with leaves they'd collected. In every image, her love for her daughter shone through like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Jonathan had crumpled the report in his fist, then smoothed it out again, reading it obsessively. The woman who had carried him 3 blocks with a twisted ankle, who had shared her daughter's goldfish crackers with him, who had looked at him like he hung the moon, she was exactly who she appeared to be. Pure. Genuine. Everything he'd forgotten existed in the world. And he had destroyed it. The view from his windows stretched across Elliott Bay to the Olympic Mountains, but all Jonathan could see was Maya's face when she'd realized who he was. The way her hand had flown to cover her heart, as if he'd struck her physically. The devastation in her voice when she'd whispered, "This was all a game to you." No. He wanted to scream the word into the empty penthouse. Nothing about Maya had been a game. She was the first real thing that had happened to him in years. His reflection stared back from the darkened windows, the same sharp features, the same expensive clothes, but something fundamental had changed. Maya had seen past all of it to whatever was left of his authentic self, and in her eyes, he had remembered who he used to be. Before the billions. Before the isolation. Before he'd forgotten that money couldn't buy the things that actually mattered. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling?" Miranda's voice carried through the speaker. I have the quarterly reports ready for your review, and the legal team needs your signature on the Morrison acquisition papers." Jonathan stared at the stack of documents on his desk, contracts and projections and profit margins that would have consumed his attention a week ago. Now they felt like artifacts from another life, important to someone he used to be, but meaningless to who he was becoming. "Miranda, what's the status on the Seattle Children's Hospital donation?" A pause. "The $5 million? It's been approved and processed, sir. Is there something specific you need regarding?" "Cancel it, sir." Jonathan's pulse quickened as the idea formed. "Cancel the donation. All of it. I want to reallocate those funds." His mind was racing now, pieces clicking together like a puzzle solving itself. "And get me Tom Bradley from the Housing Development Division. I need him here in an hour." "Mr. Sterling, I'm not sure I understand." "Also, contact every shelter in Seattle. I want a meeting with their directors tomorrow morning. All of them." Jonathan was already moving toward his laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "And get me the mayor's office on the line. Tell them Jonathan Sterling wants to discuss affordable housing initiatives." The silence stretched longer this time. "Sir, might I ask what this is regarding?" Jonathan stopped typing and stared at his reflection in the dark window. For the first time in 3 days, he looked like himself again, not the polished CEO, but the man Maya had seen that night in the rain. The man who had remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. "It's regarding doing something that actually makes a difference." As Miranda hurried to execute his requests, Jonathan pulled up the city planning database and began studying zoning laws and vacant properties. His mind, the same analytical engine that had built an empire, now focused on a different kind of problem. How do you house a city's homeless population? How do you create not just shelter, but dignity? How do you build something that matters? Hours passed unnoticed as Jonathan worked, his ankle propped up on a chair, coffee growing cold at his elbow. By dawn, he had outlined a comprehensive plan: purchase and convert unused commercial buildings into transitional housing units. Partner with job training programs. Create on-site childcare and educational resources. Not charity, but investment in human potential. The plan would cost $60 million to start. He could afford it without noticing the dent in his fortune, but that wasn't the point. The point was creating something real, something that would help people like Maya not just survive, but thrive. But even as he refined the details, Jonathan knew this wasn't enough. Grand gestures and corporate philanthropy were still just another way of keeping distance, of solving problems from 37 floors up. Maya had seen through his barriers once. She would see through this too. The truth sat in his chest like a stone. He couldn't buy his way back into her good graces. Couldn't impress her with his wealth or power. She had cared about him when she thought he was nobody special, and that was exactly why his deception hurt so much. If he wanted a chance with Maya, a real chance, he would have to give her something money couldn't purchase. He would have to give her the truth. All of it. Starting with why a billionaire had been wandering the streets alone in the rain. Jonathan reached for his phone, then stopped. Not a call. Not a message through an intermediary. If he was going to bare his soul to the woman who had saved him in more ways than one, he needed to do it face to face, as the man she had helped that night, not the CEO he became in daylight. He would find her. And this time, he would tell her everything. 3 months later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maya's new office at Sterling Dynamics. She still couldn't believe it was real. director of community outreach, overseeing a $50 million initiative to end homelessness in Seattle. But it wasn't charity. Jonathan had seen her presentation to the board, watched her outline programs based on lived experience, and known she was exactly what his company needed to make real change. Maya adjusted the framed photo on her desk, Sophia grinning in her new school uniform at Roosevelt Elementary, finally stable enough to make friends and dream about the future. Their apartment in Queen wasn't lavish, but it had 2 bedrooms, a view of the Sound, and most importantly, it was theirs. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Jonathan appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups from the Pike Place market vendor who'd become their regular, the same spot where they'd shared their first real conversation 3 months ago. He looked different now, more relaxed. The expensive suits remained, but the walls had come down. "Thought you might need caffeine before the city council presentation," he said, crossing to her desk. "You know me too well." Maya accepted the cup, their fingers brushing in a gesture that still sent warmth through her chest. "Are you nervous?" "Me? I've presented to Fortune 500 boards, international delegations, congressional committees." He paused, then smiled. "Yeah, I'm terrified. These are real people's lives we're talking about. People like you were." Maya stood, moving to the window that overlooked Pioneer Square. She could see the Union Gospel Mission from here, the same building where she'd stood in line with Sophia just months ago. "Look." Jonathan joined her, following her gaze to the square below. Construction crews were breaking ground on the new transitional housing complex, the first phase of their initiative. 48 units designed with dignity, not just function. Job training centers. Child care facilities. Everything Maya had dreamed of during those nights when sleep wouldn't come. "Tommy starts his security training next week," Maya said softly. The veteran who'd talked to invisible enemies had been clean for 60 days now, his demons quieted by therapy and the simple gift of hope. Mrs. Patterson got approved for the senior housing unit. She cried when I told her. "And the teenager?" "Marcus." "Michael," Maya corrected with a smile. "He's in our coding boot camp. Turns out he's brilliant with computers. Reminds me of someone else I know." Jonathan laughed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They fit together perfectly now, all the barriers dissolved. "I still can't believe you carried me 6 blocks on a twisted ankle. I still can't believe you let me." Maya leaned back against his chest, remembering that night, the weight of his arm around her shoulders, his quiet thanks, the way he'd looked at her like she was remarkable instead of broken. "Maya." His voice grew serious. "There's something I want to ask you." She turned in his arms, seeing nervous excitement in his dark eyes. "Jonathan Sterling, if you're about to propose to me in my office where anyone could walk in." "Actually." He dropped to one knee right there beside her desk, producing a small velvet box. "I was thinking exactly that." Maya's hands flew to her mouth as he opened the box to reveal a ring that caught the morning light. Simple, elegant, perfect. Not the ostentatious diamond she might have expected, but a sapphire the color of Seattle sky after the rain clears. "Maya Rodriguez, you saved me long before you helped me with my ankle. You showed me what real strength looks like, what genuine love feels like. You taught me that worth isn't measured in bank accounts or boardrooms, but in how we lift each other up." His voice caught with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the gift of your love?" Through her tears, Maya could barely whisper yes. As Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya thought about the woman who'd stood in that shelter line, counting crumpled bills and wondering how she'd failed so completely. That woman couldn't have imagined this moment, not just the proposal, but the wholeness. The sense that she was exactly where she belonged. "There's one more thing," Jonathan said, standing and pulling out his phone. "Sophia? You can come in now." The office door burst open, and Sophia bounded in wearing a miniature version of Maya's blazer, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers from Pike Place Market. Did she say yes? Did she say yes? She said yes. Jonathan scooped Sophia up, spinning her around as she shrieked with delight. "Does this mean you're going to be my daddy?" Sophia asked, suddenly shy. Jonathan's eyes met Maya's over their daughter's head. "If that's what you want, princess, I'd be honored." Sophia threw her arms around his neck. "I painted you a picture. It's our family in front of our new house. The one with the red door." Maya's heart swelled as she remembered Sophia's paintings from the shelter, always drawing homes she'd never had, families she dreamed of. Now those dreams were coming true, but not in the way she'd ever imagined. Better. Real. "I love you," Jonathan whispered, pulling Maya close with his free arm. "I love you too," she whispered back, then added with a smile, "both of you." Outside the window, construction workers continued building the foundation for something new. Just like Maya and Jonathan, taking the broken pieces of their separate lives and creating something stronger together. Love at last, unexpected and perfect. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya Rodriguez Sterling to be believed in happy endings. Love truly does come when we least expect it and in ways we never imagined. Share in the comments below. What's the most unexpected way love has entered your life? Your story might inspire someone who needs hope today.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can never imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.